The NCAA spent decades telling you that sports betting was the single biggest threat to college athletics. They lobbied Congress, they sued states, they called it an existential danger to the games you love. And then, in April 2025, they quietly signed a deal to sell live March Madness data directly to sportsbooks through 2032. So what changed? A $2.8 billion settlement happened, NIL costs happened, and suddenly the people who built the wall decided the bricks were worth more as inventory. Here's what the NCAA isn't telling Congress while they're still up there lobbying for prop bet restrictions. They're already cashing the checks those bets generate. Stick around because the numbers on this are genuinely wild. To understand how fast this flip happened, you need to go back to 1992. That's when the NCAA backed the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, PASPA, which effectively banned sports betting in 46 states. Their argument was simple: gambling corrupts competition, and college athletes are especially vulnerable because they're not paid professionals with agents and legal teams watching their backs. Fast forward to 2012, and NCAA President Mark Emmert is calling sports betting the greatest threat to college athletics. Not player safety, not conference realignment, betting. They were so committed to this position that when New Jersey tried to legalize sports wagering in its own state, the NCAA was right there in court fighting to stop it. Then Murphy v. NCAA happened in 2018. The Supreme Court ruled that PASPA was unconstitutional, that Congress couldn't just tell states what laws they couldn't pass. The NCAA lost. Sports betting started spreading state by state, and the NCAA had to figure out what to do with an argument that no longer had any legal force behind it. Here's where it gets interesting. Within about 24 months of that ruling, the NCAA quietly started building what they called an authorized gaming operator framework. Same organization, totally different posture. Instead of betting destroys integrity, the new message was, we can protect integrity better if we're inside the tent. They repackaged their opposition as a compliance product and started selling it. Now, this is where Charlie Baker comes in, and this is the contradiction that should bother anyone paying attention to college sports business. Baker took over as NCAA president in 2023. In January 2025, he sat before a Senate committee and testified about the need for federal restrictions on prop bets involving college athletes. He talked about harassment. He talked about the mental health toll on student athletes when their individual performance becomes a betting market. Genuine concerns, honestly. And then 4 months later, in April 2025, his organization expanded its Genius Sports partnership specifically to enable sportsbooks to access live NCAA championship data, the same data that powers those prop bet markets through 2032. That's not hypocrisy for its own sake. That's the gap between what an organization says to a Senate committee and what it signs in a boardroom. And it's worth naming clearly. The NCAA framed this deal around something called integrity fees. The idea that sportsbooks pay a percentage of handle back to the league as a kind of licensing cost for using their data responsibly. On paper, it sounds like the NCAA is extracting value from gambling rather than just enabling it. But let's do the math. Integrity fees typically run between 0.25% and 1% of handle. March Madness betting handle in 2025 came in around $4 billion. That means the integrity fee ceiling on that volume is roughly $40 million, and the floor is closer to $10 million. Meanwhile, per Sportico reporting, the NCAA reported $1.38 billion in total revenue in fiscal 2024. The math alone tells you integrity fees were never the point. They were political cover, a way to tell Congress we're extracting accountability from the betting industry, while the real revenue engine, the data licensing deal itself, was being structured quietly in the background. The reason this works as a story is that integrity fees gave the NCAA a vocabulary shift. They went from betting as a threat to we manage betting risk without ever having to admit the flip happened. But here's what that framing cost them. Once you're selling the data that powers prop bet markets on your own athletes, the integrity argument doesn't belong to you anymore. You've structurally compromised it. So let's talk about what the actual deal looks like, because this is where the money gets real. Genius Sports, a London-based data company trading on the NYSE, has had a relationship with the NCAA since 2018. The original deal put Genius in position to package NCAA statistics for broadcasters and fan platforms. Functional, but not transformative. The April 2025 expansion changed the scope entirely. Under the new terms, Genius has the exclusive right to sell live, official data from every NCAA championship event, including both March Madness tournaments, to licensed sportsbooks in the US. That data feeds real-time prop bet markets on DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, and every other major platform running live, in-game wagering. Now here's the twist nobody talks about when the NCAA puts out a press release about fan engagement. Genius is not paying an additional upfront fee for the sportsbook rights. According to someone familiar with the details, as reported by Sportico, the two sides are continuing under the revenue share structure from the original 2018 agreement. The financial terms aren't public, but the deal value that gets cited in industry coverage lands in the $50 to $100 million range in total shared revenue for the NCAA across the contract. The national deal structure is one thing, but the most revealing version of this story is playing out at the state level, and North Carolina is the clearest example of where the dependency model leads. North Carolina launched mobile sports betting in March 2024. The state set an 18% tax rate on gross gaming revenue, one of the higher rates in the country. In the first fiscal year, that generated $131 million in tax collections. And built directly into the legislation was a provision that sent roughly 20% of that money, about $26 million, to 13 UNC system schools, specifically for athletics. Think about what that means structurally. Schools like ECU, UNC Pembroke, Western Carolina, and Appalachian State are now receiving $3.1 million or more per year each, funded entirely by the state taxing sportsbook operators. For a mid-major athletic department that runs on student fees and thin ticket revenue, $3 million doesn't just help. It's the difference between cutting a sport and keeping it. Athletic directors who expected a few $100,000 told WNC they were genuinely stunned by how much came in. Now here's the detail that exposes the real power structure. UNC Chapel Hill and NC State are excluded from the subsidy pool. The programs with existing media contracts, major donor bases, and Big Ten or ACC revenue streams don't need the money, specifically to the programs that would otherwise be on the chopping block, which sounds compassionate until you realize what it creates. A class of smaller athletic departments that are now institutionally dependent on gambling activity to stay solvent. And the conflict sitting inside that model is structural, not accidental. The same student athletes at ECU whose programs are funded by betting tax revenue are also the subjects of prop bet markets running on the same Genius Sports data feed the NCAA just expanded. You can't cleanly separate betting funds or athletic department from betting markets or athletes as products. Those two things are now part of the same financial ecosystem. The broader critique here isn't that the NCAA made a bad deal in isolation. It's that the pattern, integrity fees as cover, data licensing as the real engine, state subsidies filling the gaps, adds up to a system where every level of college athletics now has a financial incentive to grow the betting market rather than regulate it. DraftKings and FanDuel ran aggressive deposit bonus campaigns during 2026 March Madness targeting new users in campus-adjacent markets. The NCAA's responsible gambling framework doesn't restrict that. It can't, because the organizations signing the data deals and the organizations running the promos are now on the same side of the ledger. That's the integrity pivot in one sentence. They traded long-term credibility risk for short-term cash flow and called it fan engagement. So here's the takeaway for anyone building a career in sports business right now. The executives getting hired understand three things: data licensing structures, state gaming legislation timelines, and how to build revenue models that survive the next settlement. If you want to see how deep this goes, pull the NCAA's public financial filing and find the line item where authorized gaming revenue appears. That number will tell you more about the future of college sports than any press release Baker puts out. If you want to understand how NIL collectives are running the same playbook to structure tax-advantaged athlete payments, That's exactly what the next video breaks down. Subscribe so you don't miss it.